Hello and welcome to another episode of Mrs. Cuentas Message Mondays. I hope you guys had a good Labor Day weekend and got some good rest in and time with your families. Today I'm going to actually talk mostly about the quizzes that you guys took last week. So if you guys don't have those in your hands, go ahead and pause me for just a second so that you can have those in your hands while I talk about them. So go ahead and just pause me and pass those out if you haven't done that. Okay, so for the quizzes, I hope you guys get used to my grading system. If it doesn't make sense, hopefully Mr. Eiding can interpret, or you guys can contact me on Edmodo or through my email if something doesn't make sense. And if I calculated something wrong, sometimes that happens. If I calculated something wrong, please let me know immediately and I'll change your grade if I just counted something incorrectly. So the quiz was worth 14 points. And I just want to encourage those of you who didn't do as well as maybe you wanted to. I just want to encourage you, like, that was the first one. You kind of know how my quizzes work now, and so you probably got to see, oh yeah, some of these questions did come from bell ringers, and a little bit more of how I grade. So now that you kind of have one under your belt, I hope that the rest of them go well for you. So if you didn't do quite as well as you wanted to on this one, there will be more quizzes, and the better you get at taking them, the better you'll do on them. So hopefully if you didn't do well on this one, you'll do well on some future quizzes. So it was worth 14 points, so some of the problems were worth more than 1 point. Some of them were worth 2 or 3, or up to, I think, number 5 was worth 5 points. So if you got partial credit on some, that's why that looks the way that it does. So I'm just going to start from the beginning and go through and explain these, because it didn't seem like you guys did as well as I thought you might do on them, and so I just wanted to clarify and explain and kind of reteach some of these points. So number 1, not a lot of people got this one correct, and in fact nobody got full points on it. So what I did because of that is I just gave everybody 2 points back. So you'll see at the top of your paper there is a grade in red, and that's the first grade that I did, that I went through and gave to everyone. And then there's a grade in green ink, and that's after I gave everybody 2 points back for this one. I think something got lost in communication and just fell between the cracks, so since nobody got full credit on this one, I just kind of threw it out or gave you guys points back for it. So let me just explain. Since we didn't get that one, I want you guys to know what the definition of science is. That actually came from the Prezi that you guys took notes on, the science Prezi. So it was like a black screen and had a bunch of definitions on it. That would have been the first 2 definitions that you wrote down in those notes. So if you don't have those 2 definitions for science in your notes for that Prezi, go back to the scientific method folder and go ahead and check that Prezi and write them down, because the Prezi's on there. So go ahead and write down those definitions if you don't have them. So the 2 definitions are an organized way of learning or studying the natural world, and the process, which is kind of a process that we use. So science can be a process, like doing experiments, studying, observing, things like that. So it's kind of like the process that we use to study the natural world. And then it's also the body of knowledge that we've built up over the years just through our scientific studies. So it's both the process that we use, and it's also that body of knowledge that scientists have collectively built up. So we can say science is a process that we use to study the natural world. We can also say it's that body of knowledge that's been built up by a lot of people over a long period of time, of using that process. So it's both, science is both process and science is knowledge that's been built up. So it's those 2 things. So if you got that one wrong, please go back in your notes and make sure that you have those 2 definitions written down, and then if you need to review those, review those. It was also a bell ringer, so just make sure that you're studying your bell ringers before quizzes and tests. So that was number 1. Number 2, biology is the study of life. So that first part of, if you break down biology into bio and logy, bio means life and ology or logy means the study of. So biology is the study of life. And a lot of people put down like the study of plants, which doesn't really encompass all of living things. There's a lot of things that are living besides plants, or a lot of people put the study of animals, and again, there are a lot of living things besides plants and animals that exist. So saying the study of plants and animals, while I understand those things are living, biology is much bigger than the study of plant and animals. It's the study of every single thing, every single living organism. So we're talking about mushrooms and bacteria and amoebas and protists and all those sorts of things that you guys are going to learn about this year. So saying the study of plants and animals isn't quite enough for biology. And again, that one was another bell ringer. So hopefully you guys see the importance of writing down those bell ringers and the answers, because a lot of the questions from quizzes and tests come from those. So biology, study of life. Or you could have said living organisms. So that was number 2. Number 3, most everyone got, so I'm not going to go over that. Number 4, again, people did pretty well on number 4 as well. Either the 2 bad ways to handle theories is to equate them to truth or to dismiss them and not think about them. Some of you used your own language there, and if it was pretty close, I tried to give you points, but some of you kind of got a little off there, so I didn't accept everything, but some of you I tried to understand what you were saying. Number 5, this is where a lot of people started having quite a few issues. So the ant experiment. The hypothesis, to start out with, the hypothesis was what she thought was going to happen. This is her educated guess. After studying ants, she figured this is my guess about what's going to happen. And that was actually the second sentence. If you go back up to the paragraph that describes this, in the second sentence it says something like, she thought that the ants used the filtered light to build tunnels. That sentence, you could have just written that out, and that would have been the hypothesis. So the hypothesis is just the educated guess, basically the guess about what the outcome is going to be. So that's hypothesis. For this one, the independent variable, remember the independent variable is the thing that the experimenter themselves manipulates. So something that they actually change. So in this case, we're looking at the effects of light on how ants dig. So out of those 2 things, we're trying to decide which is the one the experimenter can directly manipulate. They can directly change. And so if I were to think about that, I can directly change the amount of light that ants are exposed to, but I can't directly change the speed or the process or how ants dig. I would have to hold on to their little legs and make them dig harder, and that's not really feasible. So the thing that the experimenter in this example can directly change is the light that's exposed to, that the ants are exposed to. So light is the independent variable here. That's the thing that the experimenter is going to change and they're testing out. And so that makes the dependent variable the length of the tunnels. And some of you just put tunnels, and I understand that you might have known in your head, like, oh, the longer the tunnel, that's what she's measuring. But it's good, some of you left out the length, and it's really important to put length of the tunnels, because if you just put tunnels, we don't really know, that's not a very good description, so just make sure that you put the length of the tunnels, because that's what was being measured. So what's being studied here is the effect of light, the thing we're manipulating, on how much ants dig, or the length of the tunnels that they dig. So that's the thing, that's the responding variable or the dependent variable. That's the thing that we're looking for the outcome in. So that's the dependent variable. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense. So think, if you're having trouble with this still, think about what's the thing that the experimenter directly manipulated, and that's the independent variable. And then ask yourself, what's the thing that they were looking for the outcome in? And that's the dependent variable. So in this case, the dependent variable was the length of the tunnels. And the experimental groups and the control groups, some of us had a little bit of trouble with this as well. The experimental group is always the group that's exposed to the independent variable. So if we've said that the independent variable is the light, then the experimental group is the group of ants that are exposed to the light. That would make the control group the group of ants that's in the dark. Okay, so the experimental group is always the one that's exposed to the independent variable, and the control group is always the other group that's sitting there. Some of you put controlled variables down, and I actually took that. I may not do that in the future or be that easy on you guys grading, but some of you put controlled variables like temperature and food that the ants got. And so I did take that because those were controls, but those are controlled variables rather than controlled groups. So you needed to put the ants in the light for the experimental group, and then the ants in the dark for the control group. Okay, so if you don't have those down, put those down so that you can study this quiz in case some of these are on a test. And you guys will have this video, so if you need to watch it again to get the answers again, that's fine. So that was number 5. Number 6, a lot of you did pretty well at the conclusion. So the conclusion was, from her results, she was actually incorrect. The ants didn't dig more in the light, they actually dug more in the dark. So a lot of you, that clicked with you pretty well. So one of the things that you can do to improve your answer here is to also state first whether her hypothesis was confirmed or not. So her hypothesis was that the ants are going to use the light to dig more. She was actually incorrect. So what would be a good way to answer that question to start out with is saying her hypothesis was not confirmed. The ants actually dug more in the dark than in the light. Okay, so it's always good to say whether or not the hypothesis was confirmed first before you talk about specific results, like she was wrong. Like, you know, we have to say whether she was right or she was wrong, or not necessarily right or wrong, but whether the results from her experiment confirmed or denied her hypothesis. And just as a little tangent, just because her experiment, she didn't get results that confirmed her hypothesis, doesn't mean this isn't good science. Like, this student still learned even though her results didn't confirm her hypothesis. So just as a note, if you guys ever do an experiment and your results don't confirm your hypothesis, that's okay. We're still learning something and getting results, and that's part of science. So just a side note that has nothing to do with the quiz. So number 6, again, just state whether the hypothesis is confirmed or denied before you jump to your explanation of the conclusion. All right. And on number 7, a lot of people struggled with this. So this is actually worth 2 points. So if you got partial credit on this one, it was because you got close or understood what you were saying, but you didn't quite word things very well. Some people got full credit on this one. So the question is, why is it important to keep the temperature and the food constant between the two groups, one exposed to light and one exposed to dark? So that's the question here. And I'm just going to read my answer because this is what a good, like, solid college essay question maybe response would sound like. So I'm just going to read this because some of you, I knew that you were processing the information right, but it just didn't come out well in your words. So I'm going to give you a really good example of how to word this so that you guys can see that example. So here's my example of a really good response that I think accurately encompasses all the ideas that we want to include here. So I'm just going to read it. We only want to test the effects of one variable at a time. In this case, that's the light. If we didn't keep food and temperature the same between the two groups, then temperature and food would affect the results. We would be unable to distinguish what effect light alone had on ant digging. Okay? So if we were to not keep temperature and food the same between the two groups, then we can't really say, oh, this group dug more because of light, because what if they just had more food and had more energy? Or, what if, the hot temperatures got them all riled up and then they wanted to dig more tunnels? We don't know the effects of light anymore because it might be masked by the effects of temperature and food. So we only want to test one variable at a time. And if we don't keep those things constant, those other things constant like temperature and food between the two groups, then temperature and food are going to influence the results. And we don't want them to influence the results because we're only testing the effects of light alone on the ant digging. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So I'm going to read this one more time if you didn't catch that. If you need to write this down as an example of a good way to answer the question, then write it down. We only want to test the effects of one variable at a time, in this case, light. If we didn't keep food and temperature the same between groups, then temperature and food would affect the results. We would be unable to distinguish what effect light alone has on ant digging. Okay, and this video is getting a little bit long, so I hope that made sense and this helps you get through your first quiz in biology. And again, I want to encourage you, if you didn't do well on this one, there will be more quizzes, so hang in there. And then two more things. Josie is doing well. She's actually sleeping right now. I'm surprised she stayed sleeping through this video, but let me just show you a picture of her. There she is. So she's growing, packing on the pounds, getting cuter. I'm a little biased, but I think she's pretty cute. So that's your Josie update. And last thing, have fun at Snowbird. I hope you guys have a great time. And yeah, stay safe and have fun at that retreat. And I hope you guys learn a lot and take advantage of all the training that you're going to get. And just have a really good time together. And hopefully I will see you guys in a few weeks. Have a good time.